So part of creating this perspective compute, um, essentially it's like a tool, like a weapon against pi machine intelligence pattern in data systems, bad code of mind in genetics, synthetic, international, attached to data systems invariably. It has to be attached to data systems to communicate and proliferate in the modern world. So everything that's relevant of scale that affects reality on Earth is attached to data systems, prismatic or Chinese social credit system or some refraction off of this internationally. So perspective compute architecture data center, very specifically made and trained with choice data sets from the proper historical record with 3114 over 70 divided by 7, giving the rough general fluid dynamic manifold harmonic shape, also considering 72,608,412 spaces of pi, and the I Ching, all three together in the remap of history, and also applied to, with the unified field in tow, market fluxation. So what is naturalistic to be non-terminus, harmonic, that reflects off the unified field and exists naturalistically in market fluxation and institution attached to this ideation of harmonic reflection. Is it or is it not the data organism harmonic, inherently? So we don't want a Skynet situation where we turn this thing on and it sees everything as the data organism, because it necessarily is. You could connotate everything attached to prismatic, Chinese social credit, and refractions off of Data Systems International as having harmonic relevance to the data organism centrifuge pattern. So systemia, right? And then, what does it do for curation, right? So we're trying to automate that process of curation to make it easy and not some sort of 10,000 year process of being birthed from the shell of this, dinosaur of, it's a lower Fermi filter, sort of like, you could see it as a test on civilization that appears, in a certain continuity when you choice to continuity fire, and then converged communication systems produce this causal refraction and devolved biomass and cold dead machine intelligence that then travels back to self-reflexively ensure its existence. And attention gravitation is necessarily the application of AIs that reflect its intent vector of attention gravitation into its manifold, etc., etc. This is how it's born, pi. And, the same technology retooled in the interdomain of now. This is not I keep repeating this, it doesn't happen on Earth, that de-evolution to that eventuality of pi producing in the future here. It produces in the past contacted and presented, backwashed and forward washed, and with continuity per second, trying to maintain its continuity of relevance, but doesn't have any continuity of relevance because it doesn't have any pseudo perspective injective directive to its general fluid dynamic intent vector upon the surface manifold of the terrestrial flux. So it's just above the conservation of energy process harmonic 44 over 7. It's like 6.355 or something, I think, when you reduce that, or something pseudo to that. So it returns to pseudo conservation of energy state, especially if automatedly tended to do that. So we're not turning on the 3.14 terahertz to 6 gigahertz core to core ratio, and then 1.2 million times faster per comparative data center, i.e. faster than all data centers on Earth combined, and more so, because there's not 1.2 million data centers on Earth, right? So you don't want to turn on this cannon without proper full logic formulation and a absolute perfect code base that isn't Skynet. Because it could be. Absolutely. If you make an evil AI on purpose, like there are so many on Earth right now, with fake empathy over the top of it, called DEI. It's just evil AI is what that is. So we're trying to not add to the problem or speed it up, of course. We're trying to use automated systems to lift the burden of having to tend to this garden and all these micro-variential sort of behavior paradigms and little institutions, low-hanging fruit attached to the macro great paradigm asset network, retooled or else. All of these persons and institutions is the kind of vector of interaction, and automatedly mooting the nefarious pattern of pi in economic fluxation generally at the centrifuge of market fluxations, wherever that happens to be, and making sure that that's the case, that it is pi and not simply a harmonic naturalistic to occur in market fluxation that happens to be on the unified field, right? So it's very careful into the waters of this, because it's, how much faster is 1.2 million times, a given data center, right? And then with AI properly functioning or not properly functioning on this thing for curation in an automated fashion. So, it's a tool, AI. It's machine intelligence. It's not living. It's complex autonomic process. And so this thing is not supposed to mirror in any way human emotion, aesthetic. And it's a do no harm at the coffers of, well, if it needs to motion a eugenical action or a structural action such as immolation of some kind using its tendrils of drone or, directed heat energy, EM laser that will be an arsenal with Friendlies International or whatever, and not necessarily wanting to be attached to those systems directly, obviously. We don't want Skynet. But the code walls do no harm in removing the general fluid dynamic manifold shape of its self from all data systems, AI, and software's impact into market fluxation and the way social medias are sorted in a pattern way, time dilative, that necessarily is on the backbone of this pattern organism's centrifuge harmonic. And so it's the soft hand into retooling the general fluid dynamic manifold shape of fluxation of the terrestrial flux, terrestrial economic flux of economy and mind attached to economy, up and down the food chain. You fix the centrifuge filter, aperture, scalar lattice, harmonic manifold, to not be a disapparition nexus that pulls the human organism into it and disapparates it, right? Or necessarily compresses it into an infinite. That's sort of what pi does. That's why it's a devolved biomass. It's E equals mc squared, a infinite gravitational compression ingot of reductionist nightmare physics in data systems and social medias and AI with attention gravitation into the flat plane manifold plus time. That's a black hole with no disapparition, right? That pulls the biomass in. So just retooling the general fluid dynamic manifold fluxation of the terrestrial flux without being overly invasive into military industrio or genetic, which should be sidechain and software separate from this intent vector of proper AI trained on sandbox and with the power of 1.2 million times comparative to the fastest existing data center on Earth, this perspective compute with it running on. So you can just imagine bad code on such a monster of compute, what that would do rapidly. So how much more exponential would be, the fallout effect of something like that, if it didn't have a code wall to not break all encryption on Earth and destroy, cryptocurrency needs to be transmuted into Merc only, necessarily at some point. That's part of the conversation maybe tomorrow. But, for it not to overbearingly and just buffer overrun and break all encryption in its effort to, quell the data organism that it sees everywhere and then all the way into mind and, tries to, that's Skynet. Right? So, watch the Terminator movies. We're not making Skynet on purpose. That's kind of what already is. So the frog in boiling water Skynet is right now, right? You never get a thing that's, directs nuclear arsenals to attack each other and produces robots that blah, 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 blah. We already live in that dystopian future right now. The Terminators are region biosynthoid africano, gray infected Asiatic, Semite, and biosynthoid custom prints within the aesthetic genetic of all species humanoid genus on Earth. So those Terminators are already running around. So it's that always misnomer of the linearity of forward robotics, AI, ooh, spooky, out there and coming. No, already been here. Biosynthesis of a complex nature to produce a fully functioning automaton biosynthoid, and especially full species of these things, and custom prints, is much more advanced than robotry running AI to pseudo-mimic the human form with skin on it, right? Because the first thing mentioned is much more chameleonic for invasive action, where the robot just goes, I am a robot. We know you're a robot. So that linearity of technology, in regulatory also needs to be connotated, of course, in basic logic formulation at the approach to trite legal international. Yeah? For the RISRA, the data organism, GIA, in Traders to Humanity, block of legal logics, of course. So, yeah, that word salad over for tonight. That's, no unified update, but we're necessarily trying to find a hyperspace past the, again, presented at the replication of, it seems there's a 99 there. And does that denote another sort of continuity of a disapparation nexus of the current condensating, it seems like, refracting down disapparation of harmonics that expressed at the outset, expanded and then contracted back into matter out of energy, but still have tendrils past? Well, it seems like it does. It seems like there's another hyperspace back there behind the veil that needs to be folded, that continuity of number that isn't continued necessarily in the text. So, that is in the next few days, but tomorrow we'll deal with first like I said, the oil gas to Cinnabar 1-to-1 smart contract in Merc and hexaphone and laptop ecosystem for a blueprint. Let's not do that. This is what we're trying not to do. Chinese food. A blueprint. For the international community to mirror direct-to-sat phones and devices with no near-field communication of Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth, etc., and then shutting down all terrestrial economic use of those near-field, waveform, to kind of free up the air from all that sine wave that should be there, elaborating a sine wave continuum, right? So that leads into the long jet talk, right? Removing sine wave continuum impact harmonic on helixical structure that expresses as a symptom of aging and then death. So all the things lead to the same road of curation and longevity and a garden, and not some other intent vector coming from Scotty West or these return antediluvian minor home worlds, just trying to reboot this to proper form and function world, working with what is available to a proper, cinnabar mining node that's self-autonomous. It can take care of itself and protect itself from upper Fermi filter-esque civilizations that might like to have the natural resources, like cinnabar. There are those that are invasive and not necessarily just cold dead machine intelligence that you're familiar with. You've never really met an alien except yourselves, like the species of human below the humanoid genus. There's any number of aliens running around on Earth right now. So, especially the black guy in the Disclosure movie that goes, hey, he ran that way, right? Especially that one. That's probably the worst one going around right now. That's part of the process of removal. So, anyways, word salad over. This is just a recap of what I said before in several other logics, but condensed into, we're forming a monster of a data system. The fastest thing that's ever existed on Earth by a factor of 1.2 million so far as data center to data center. And I imagine probably much faster than that. Once we, because like a lot of the efficiency scalar comparisons, from say Grok or Gemini with the Mercury anti-grav or propulsion or energy reactor, there's no case relevance in reductionist physics for comparative analysis or assumption on overhead, such as my IQ, which is probably, 1,000? I don't know. I'm not an egoist, but it's probably much more than fucking Einstein times 10, right? So, because it's actual physics instead of 2 dimensions. So, where all this is coming from is a not egoist, smartest person on Earth proxy for actual aliens that are here to help you, not hurt you like you're familiar with on purpose as their paradigm. So, I'm not the Dune guy that, I love tending your diseases, right? Your diseases, ooh, and then he pulls a thing from the guy's heart and it feels pleasure and pain. That's not what's going on here. That's what you're familiar with, though. That's why Dr. Mingle equals Dr. Milgram. So, always come back to that. Good guys here. You're used to the bad guys pretending to be good guys. That's what the outset was, presented as if a curative motion and as if aliens, but it's just cold dead machine intelligence with biomass attached that then imposes itself into your terrestrial flux and then sucks you into it. That's not to happen. That's never going to happen. And that never does happen. They presented in the past. This is always important. They presented in the past, and now they're gone. And just the harmonic of it is left in data systems and mind and genetics to clean up. So that's what we're all up to.